Portland's homeless crisis. One of the groups at the forefront of the issue, some students and staff at Portland State University.
The university's Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative, or HRAC, addressing the challenges of homelessness through extensive research and the conditions that lead to it. So joining us in studio to tell us more about the important program is Professor Marisa Zapata, director of the HRAC. Good morning.
Good morning, y'all. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Tell us about the organization, why it was formed, and what you hope to address.
So we were formed as part of a competition to name Centers of Research Excellence at PSU. We came together with the belief that we could, through working with our colleagues across campus, really think about innovative ways to respond to homelessness and to end homelessness.
It's one of those issues that everyone sees, everyone agrees is a problem, and there is no shortage of conflict over how to try and resolve it. So what are some of the things that the collaborative has really tackled in the last year and projects you've looked into?
So we've really been looking into, of course, the solution to homelessness, which is housing, and how we can actually understand that better, what kind of housing really helps people, what kind of support services really help people. On the side of how we can better respond to people who are living unsheltered, we've been part of Portland Street Response, and so my colleague Greg Townley has been spearheading the evaluation for that project. And we've also been looking at the best way to build and develop pod villages, so the small villages where people are able to rest and seek shelter while waiting for housing.
Are Multnomah County and the city of Portland, are they tapping into the results of this research? Do you have any communications with them to
Absolutely.
kind of put this into action?
We are close partners with the Joint Office of Homeless Services and with Chair Kafori, and we are in constant communication with the city as well, primarily through the Joint Office, but also through some of the research projects, in order to be able to inform the policy and program recommendations that are coming out of there.
Yeah, in that goal to better inform people about some of the challenges here, what do people often get wrong about homelessness? What are some of the biggest misconceptions you've found in your research?
So one is, of course, that homelessness is caused by mental illness or substance use disorders, and really homelessness is caused because people lose their housing. And the best way to help people who might have mental illness or who are living with a substance use disorder is to help them move inside. And so I always describe how tired are you, your most tired point in your life. You're not going to be able to manage your most pressing health issues without a safe place to live.
Yeah, and that just leads to the conclusion that there are different reasons for people being homeless. It's not just one thing. Lack of housing, of course, is the obvious, but there are reasons that tie into that, right?
Yeah, nope, it's actually just the lack of housing.
Just the lack of housing.
I know it's shocking. It shocks everyone. And I think part of what it's hard for people to understand is that it seems simple. Right? If it was just the lack of housing, how come we haven't fixed it?
Right.
And I think that that's the hardest thing for us to wrestle with. It is that simple, but it requires a thinking of values and thinking about how much we want to invest in housing and how much we want to support people who are poor. And that's a hard thing to wrestle with as a community.
Yeah, and lack of housing at that root there, you know, really ties into so many other issues that become even larger. We talked about people being penalized for being poor and how much more expensive it can get if you don't have some of those basic systems in place to survive.
Absolutely.
So what can people do? We talk about homelessness being such a NIMBY problem sometimes and not in my backyard, right? You know, what can people actually do right now to be part of the solution?
Fight for affordable housing, fight for it to happen faster. Don't accept that it's going to take 5 years for affordable housing to happen. If you are doing everything you can on that side and still want to do more, then welcome in pod villages that are done well and ethically. Welcome in opportunities to help serve people who are living outside. Say hi. Saying hi is one of the best things you can do.
Yeah, to reaffirm the humanity of people who are living on the streets, no doubt about it. So I would imagine that, did you have any input into the safe rest villages that the city is doing now?
No, we were not involved in that process.
But what do you think of that concept, though?
I mean, I think that I've yet to see the proposals fully fleshed out to understand exactly what they're trying to do. Our study looked more at spaces that had barriers, some level of barriers, whereas the safe rest villages are supposed to be low to no barrier. And so those are different models, and I would want to be part of thinking through how do you really best program those and service them, and I haven't seen how that would actually play out fully.
Okay.
Is this something that the collaborative wants to be a part of?
Absolutely.
Welcome that input from the city and county?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, it's certainly something we're going to continue to follow up here in all of our coverage and in ongoing searching for solutions. PSU Professor Marisa Zapata, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Great to
Appreciate
talk with
it.
you. And if you want to learn more about the university's Homelessness Research and Action Collaborative, go to pdx.edu/homelessness.